Good morning. It is Wednesday, February 11th, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, fighting in eastern Ukraine surges as government forces and pro-Russian fighters try to make gains ahead of peace talks that begin today. HSBC Bank is under fire over Swiss accounts after media reports reveal it helped wealthy customers dodge taxes and conceal millions of dollars of assets. And later on the show, Valentine's Day is 2 days ahead. We will examine who exactly is responsible for this event that so many around the world love to celebrate or hate. Good morning, I'm Yael Levi, and we begin with the Ukraine. This morning, where fighting between government forces and pro-Russian rebels raged yesterday ahead of peace talks that are due to begin today in Minsk. Rockets killed more than 10 civilians and soldiers deep in Ukrainian government-held territory late last night, and Russian rebels, pushed on with an assault on an army-held rail junction. The advances by pro-Russian rebels diminished hopes of a deal when Russia, Ukraine, France, and Germany gathered today under a new Franco-German initiative to halt fighting in a war that has killed more than 5,000 people thus far. European officials say it is difficult to imagine that rebels agreeing to halt and go back to earlier positions after weeks during which they have been advancing relentlessly will actually be the scenario. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin, on a two-day visit to Cairo, has blamed the United States and the European Union for what he called their expansionist policies for the crisis in the Ukraine. Putin once again denied direct Russian involvement in the conflict, and he warned Kiev to stop its military operations in the east and hold peace talks with the rebels. We're joined in studio by the director of the Center for European Studies at the IDC Herzliya, Dr. Esther Lupatin. Good morning to you. And of course, before we break it down, let's take a look at the following report about the latest from the Ukraine.
Rocket strikes hit Ukraine's military headquarters and a nearby residential area in the east of the country on Tuesday, killing at least 3 civilians and wounding many army personnel. The government-controlled Donetsk Regional Administration said the rockets had been fired from a nearby rebel-controlled area, in what is another attack in the ongoing conflict in the east of the country. One day earlier, a soup kitchen was hit by rocket fire in the Luhansk region. Loud explosions rang in the city, sending employees scurrying to seek shelter in a basement. In the wake of these events, about 100 men arrived in a mobilization center in Donetsk to volunteer and fight with pro-Russian separatists against government troops.
They keep bombing us. We're volunteering for our houses, for the motherland, for mother, for family. I want for my kids to live in a normal country.
The presidents of Ukraine, Russia, Germany, and France are scheduled to meet in Minsk on Wednesday in an attempt to hammer out a peace plan. But while on visit in Cairo on Tuesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin seemed defiant as he blamed the US and the European Union for the Ukraine crisis, claiming these powers have, quote, expansionist policies in Ukraine. Putin is on a 2-day trip to strengthen economic ties with Egypt, which he called Russia's most trusted partner.
We're also joined from Kiev by freelance journalist Volodymyr Solob. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Good for us to have you on. First question: peace talks supposedly beginning today in Minsk. The feeling in the Ukraine from the population, did these talks hold any type of chance?
Well, the Ukrainian population, the Ukrainians, as well as the entire Europe, is basically have their eyes fixed on Minsk today because the meeting is taking place on the highest levels. You have the presidents of Ukraine and Russia, along with the presidents of the Chancellor, German Chancellor, and the French president meeting in Minsk. So their hopes are very high, and the stakes are also very high because, as you have seen, the violence is spreading throughout the east of Ukraine, and more people, both civilians and soldiers, are being killed. So yes, the hopes are very high for the 2 days talks.
And Volodymyr, you are staying with us, but second question first. In terms of, there's some reports, conflicting reports, that overnight there was some ceasefire supposedly reached between the pro-Russian rebels and the Ukrainian forces fighting in eastern Ukraine. Is that even something that can be corroborated? Is that true?
It doesn't look to be very much so because, well, technically and legally, the ceasefire is in place since September. But as you have seen in many reports, this has been violated almost every day. And starting from mid-January, the fighting has escalated to the highest levels. We have seen the battles for Donetsk airport. We have seen the battles for the strategic town of Debaltseve, and the awful shellings of civilian cities of Mariupol and just yesterday Kramatorsk.
Now, Volodymyr, you are staying with us, obviously, from the Ukraine. Dr. S. Lopatin of the IDCM Institute in Herzliya. This is looking very, very bad. This is a full-blown war. This is no longer a conflict, so it seems. There's a meeting today. But when you listen to Vladimir Putin, Russian President Vladimir Putin, he basically, and many people in the West are raising an eyebrow, he's blaming both the Ukraine and the EU for their expansionist policies. How can one say that when it is clearly pro-Russian forces that are expanding in eastern Ukraine?
Well, it's very interesting, argument. I mean, I would say that to some extent, I don't agree with him, with his behavior. He's been very aggressive and violent. But at the same time, I have to agree with what he was saying. The problem was that the whole crisis in Ukraine started when, in 2013, Yanukovych, the president of Ukraine at the time, was about to sign DCFTA, free trade agreement with the European Union, which was about to give free access to goods from Ukraine to the European Union and vice versa. The problem with the agreement was, and that's something that really upset the Russians, and the very last minute Yanukovych had actually to change his mind, because the agreement actually said Ukraine is compelled to adopt EU standards with regard to products, which means that if you make toys for kids or whatever, it has to follow the standards of the EU. It means that products actually who come in from Russia won't be qualified to enter Ukraine. And if you look at the volume of trade between Ukraine and Russia, we're talking about 50% of the import of Ukraine comes from Russia. It means that Russia said it's going to be detrimental for our trade relations and we're going to lose out of this deal. So eventually, Yanukovych did not sign the agreement. He fled to Russia. 2014, with the new government in Ukraine, the EU nevertheless offers the same agreement to the new government. They signed the agreement. The European Parliament ratified the agreement in September 2014. And eventually, they decided now it's in a ratification process. But Russia said again, this agreement is going to affect us tremendously. So eventually, the European Union agreed a few months ago to suspend the application of parts of this agreement. But what I'm saying is that there was no strategy vis-a-vis Russia.
There's no strategy, but that said, and I'm asking you, when Vladimir Putin says that, he denies any kind of connection between pro-Russian forces fighting in eastern Ukraine, I mean, that's not something that the Western world can actually take in stride, correct?
No. I mean, it's very clear that I'm pretty sure that he was delivering weapons and sending troops to the area. It's very clear. I mean, and I'm sure he wants to deny it, but at the same time, I think he wants also to send a message. The message is, we're here, we're strong, do not dismiss us, and if we're not going to find a solution which is going to be satisfactory for us, we're not going to be hesitating to use weapons against
those type of weapons. Yeah. And speaking of how bad this can get, and it's not looking good, Volodymyr, in the Ukraine with us, the American administration, the U.S. President Barack Obama has said, he's noted that, there is a consideration to send arms to Ukrainian forces. Same has been said by several high-level officials, such as Vice President Biden. I mean, is this something that the Ukrainian government really wants to happen, to get more weapons and assistance when it comes to weapons from the United States against the pro-Russian forces?
Well, Ukrainian army has been in a very dire condition ever since this war or conflict began last summer. And there has been a notion among the Ukrainian population, among the Ukrainians, that the Western countries, the West, should do something to help Ukraine and do something militarily. There were thoughts about sending troops, which is, of course, out of the question. So the consensus among the population and with the government right now as well is that Ukrainian government needs Western military support, lethal military support. But again, at this point, we're talking about defensive type of lethal weapons.
But fascinating point, though, Dr. Lopatin, defensive type of lethal weapons, be it that or not, if the United States gets itself involved, granted by sending equipment, weapons to Ukraine. Isn't this the beginning? I mean, isn't this the beginning of a new Cold War?
To a large extent, yes. And I think it would be a big mistake. Like, I understand the Ukrainian, but at the same time, like, if they're going to send a weapon to Ukraine, eventually we're going to see the beginning of the Cold War. And I think the problem is that the Europeans are not going to support America. They're not going to be on the side of Obama. And Merkel and Hollande were very clear on that. They oppose very much sending weapons to Ukraine. So
if something like that happens, what would Putin do if we're theorizing?
What Putin would do, I think, like, it's very clear that Ukraine lost. I mean, the question is to what extent. And I think that it's better for Ukraine to find a diplomatic solution. And I hope that something will come up today. And if not, but hopefully in the future. Yeah. But if not, it might be that they're going to lose, like, the whole eastern part of Ukraine. And if there's going to be, like, a real military clash between, backed by Americans, might be that Ukraine as a whole is at risk, and might be that it will be, I don't know, like, I don't want to talk about the Cold War, but it's actually, Ukraine is going to be in a grave danger.
In a grave danger. And Volodymyr, would you agree that, I mean, I'm wondering, what are the feelings of the people of the Ukraine? Because you're sitting, you're in Kiev, you're sitting there. What are the feelings when it comes to how they want this played out? Many around the Western world, many people in the media, as you've heard here, are saying that Ukraine in many ways has already lost. Would you agree to that?
Well, first of all, I don't really agree. Again, this is a notion among the Ukrainian population that sending of U.S. weapons will be the beginning of the start of the new Cold War, because it looks like the new Cold War has already begun. And it began with Russia's continuous denials of its involvement in the east of Ukraine. More likely that the sending of the weapons will be the beginning of the hot war in Ukraine. And unfortunately, Ukraine will be the battleground for this. But again, as you correctly say, there are more and more facts indicating that Ukraine is losing this war. Yeah. So this supply of weapons, which Ukrainian government is hoping to get from the United States, is something which could give the Ukrainian government and Ukrainian military a second chance to hope and win this war.
And when it comes to the Ukrainian population, West and East, at the end of the day, though, it is a split population, isn't it, still?
Well, there was a very split population up until this war began. But right now, a lot of people from the East are supporting the central government. And the population which supports the separatists is living on a very limited part of territory, and that is just, as the recent polls suggested, that is just 6% of the population which support the separatists. So, answer to your question, yes, there was a split in the society, but this war has very much brought a lot of people together in the fight for the Ukrainian land, for its territory.
Dr. Lupatin, same idea to you. Obviously, at the end of the day, what's happening in the Ukraine right now is this because there is a bulk of population in the East that are very much pro-Russian, that regard themselves as Russian,
yes. No? Yeah. Well, that's a problem, Crimea, it's a very clear case. Like, it's been, like, a part of Russia for almost 300 years. So, like, it's very clear that I doubt that whether Crimea is going to go back to Ukraine. I think it's a done deal. As we got to eastern part of Russia, there are many people who have, like, Russian allegiance. They see themselves as Russian, they speak Russian. So I think it might be very difficult, and Putin can make the case, they are Russians, and I'm going to protect and defend the Russian interests.
Right. Well, obviously, if weapons are sent from the United States, it actually gives Putin an excuse to use more force in many ways.
That's the problem. The problem is, unless, America is going to send troops, which I don't think it's going to happen, and anything, like, they're going to lose. Like, every time you fight against the Russians, the history suggests that you lose. So you cannot really win the Russians. It's over. The question is, like, what's going to be the best case scenario? And I hope that diplomatically it would be possible to reach a kind of a solution that maybe, like, a small part of Ukraine, of eastern part of Ukraine, is going to be, going to get kind of autonomy, like, or a greater autonomy. That's the best solution, I think. On the other hand, I think, like, maybe the European Union should be, like, more creative. And at this time of crisis, maybe, like, offer, like, something to the Russians, because for the moment, if you look at the trade relations, like, and the agreement that Russia has with the European Union, like partnership agreement, it's actually considered to be one of the, not the best, one of the least best agreement that the European Union has with countries outside the EU. So I think maybe like the EU should offer something in return to the Russians, something that might appease them, something that might cause them. And I think they have the power to do so. So maybe, I mean, I don't know. Like,
No.
Maybe
it's an interesting notion. But if we're looking at, I want to touch back, if we're looking at the idea that Ukraine, you know, as Volodymyr said, is losing, and you said has already lost, you know, if Ukraine is losing, Volodymyr, you know, at the end of the day, without eastern Ukraine, you know, where does that leave the country? If in the event that that happens, I'm sure that's not something you want to hear, but it's not looking good. Because there's, as you mentioned, there was already a ceasefire or a peace agreement, quote unquote, that was signed back in September that completely, you know, evaporated into thin air, that nobody seems to have taken seriously, or the pro-Russian forces didn't take it seriously. But what can be, you know, what can be the future for Ukraine in your mind? You know, if this persists and in the eastern part is not won over back, is not won back again?
Well, unfortunately, if the eastern part of Ukraine is not gone back under the control of the central government, it looks like this will be a frozen conflict for many, many years, because definitely the government in Kyiv is not ready to give up any more parts of Ukrainian land apart from Crimea, which they also contest at all times, that they're not accepting the secession of Crimea to Russia. Definitely, they're not ready to keep up to cope with losing more territory, and this will be a frozen conflict, as I said, for many years, with more lost lives, both civilian and military.
No, and which is the tragic bit of it. Dr. Lupanin, you know, as I'm trying to look ahead to the future, what does this, you know, what does this mean for the Ukraine? What can the future look like for the Ukraine if this persists? Because it seems like at the end of the day, the United States can say it wants to send weapons. If they will remains to be seen. Putin is not giving up, and the EU doesn't seem to be able to do much. It's Ukraine's left in the shadow in this.
I think like it doesn't look so good. To be honest with you, I really feel bad for the Ukrainians, because like they were so optimistic, and in a way like they really wanted to join even the European Union. The problem is, from the beginning, the European Union did not want Ukraine to be part of the European Union.
Really?
So like the compromise was to offer them like this agreement, the DCFTA, like the comprehensive free trade agreement, as a kind of a compromise. And that's a problem, because there seems to be like asymmetric in the expectations. And I think in a way like the European Union, not only in a way like indirectly like is responsible for what happened in Ukraine, but on the moment of truth, they are leaving actually Ukraine behind, and they're not supporting them. Exactly. And that's a problem. And I think that I hope for them that the best solution will be that maybe like the eastern part of Ukraine is going to get a greater autonomy, and then an agreement is going to be reached. But if not, it doesn't seem to. It doesn't
seem, and ultimately, borders have just been shifted in Europe. Borders, that, as the Europeans, as the world knows them, have changed. Volodymyr, I want to thank you for joining us from Kiev this morning. Of course, Dr. Lupatin, same to you. Thank you for being with us this morning as we move along. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is in Sweden for an official visit amid boiling anger in Israel over the Nordic country's deepening ties with the Palestinians. Abbas met with Sweden's new prime minister to further international support for his cause after the Nordic state infuriated Israel when it became the first major European country to recognize Palestine as a state. Now, in a joint press conference in Stockholm, the Palestinian leader said he will work to revive peace talks with Israel, but skirted questions on how to end the conflict or tackle violence by the Islamic group Hamas. Israeli-Palestinian peacemaking has been on hold since the last round of United States-brokered peace talks collapsed a year ago, partly hampered by gaps between Abbas and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And of course, Palestinian elections are also overdue and strained by the geographic and political split between Abbas and Hamas. Now, in a jab at Hamas, Abbas said yesterday that Palestinians must be able to decide who should lead them and if they accept violence. Now, to hear more about it, we're first joined on the phone by Times of Israel senior Middle East analyst Avi Visit. Avi, good morning to you.
Good morning, Gail.
Thank you for being with us. I want to start firstly with what Abbas said in Sweden. With the only way to achieve our goals is to go to the democracy, to go to elections, parliamentary elections. Now, we're all discussing constantly Palestinians and Israelis and, you know, what's going to happen to the talks. But ultimately, there is also such a rift within the Palestinian community. Elections in the Palestinian community have been postponed constantly. Why is that?
Well, let's let us say, make some kind of I have to say that I'm a little bit careful about what Abbas said yesterday in Sweden, for the simple fact that, even when he's saying we're interested in getting to elections, in reaching to elections that, during the shortest time possible, it doesn't mean that they are going to elections. Although he's saying I'm interested in renewing the negotiations with Israel, it doesn't say that he's going to renew the negotiations with Israel. President Mahmoud Abbas is a politician, just like Benjamin Netanyahu is a politician. And at the end of the day, he is saying things that need to be said. He's saying things that the Palestinian public, the Palestinian people would like him, the Palestinian street. He is a politician. And this is why he's saying, I'm in favor of elections. This is why he's approaching the international community and saying, I'm interested in renewing the negotiations. Now, the question is, of course, Yael, is it possible to go for elections right now in the West Bank and Gaza Strip?
Exactly.
The answer is no.
And the answer is no. And before we touch on, what it means, for the future of the Palestinian community, but you said something very interesting, that, he stands on an international stage, and of course, it will behoove him to say things like, I'm interested in progressing the peace negotiations. But is it because Mahmoud Abbas, and that I'm asking to you, is his position within the Palestinian regime of the PLO in the West Bank, is it faltering? Is he saying that to maintain a status quo that can maintain him in power? Because there's been talk over the course of the last several days that he's supposedly looking for a successor. Is that also just political talk?
Right now, it's not. I think that the opposite. I think that what Abbas is trying to do is to remove any potential successors, just like what he's doing with Mohammed Dahlan, who, then again, as far as I see it, as far as I hear from the Palestinian Authority officials, this is the number one enemy. It's not Israel. It's not Hamas. Mohammed Dahlan is the number one enemy of the Palestinian people, nation, the Palestinian Authority. And I'm sorry if I'm being cynical here.
No.
But Mahmoud Abbas has a public opinion issue, meaning he's not. He cares a lot about what the Palestinian people have to say about him, about the way that the Palestinian Authority operates, etc., etc. It is right that he doesn't face elections like Netanyahu faces, and Netanyahu deals a lot with foreign policy when he deals with internal policy, meaning talking about Iran because of the internal elections. So yes, Abbas is also doing the same thing, meaning he's talking about early elections, he's talking about the negotiations with Israel, while thinking about his own internal politics.
And when it comes to Dahlan, and it's fascinating that you raised that point, how much of a threat does he pose to Abbas? Because strongman Dahlan, from my days of reporting in Gaza, I remember, him fleeing. I remember the support he had back then in Gaza, just from PLO factions. But is he that much of a threat to Abbas? Is there support for Dahlan inside the Palestinian community of the West Bank?
No, he's not. He's not a threat. Mohammed Dahlan is not such a real threat for Abbas. But then again, Abbas is quite panicked because of him, and he's quite panicked because of someone from inside Fatah is trying to undermine what he's trying to do. Now, let us understand something, and this is something that you asked before, and I would like to mention it again.
Right.
During March, for some reason, and there are some very good reasons for that, the security apparatus in Israel is warning that might be during March, it might come through April, but in the next month or two, there might be a very big escalation that involves and might affect, of course, the Palestinian Authority. And it might be under the encouragement of the Palestinian Authority, meaning at some point the Palestinian Authority might say we're finishing with the security coordination.
Right.
We're stopping it. And that might bring a big escalation to the region.
If that happens, Avi Sischaov, thank you for being with us. We're going live to Ramallah now to find out from Dimitri Dilyani, Revolutionary Council, Fatah Revolutionary Council. Dimitri Dilyani, good morning to you. Is that the case? If, in fact, Avi Sischaov just mentioned to us that the Palestinians are warning to stop the security coordination during March with Israel. Is that the case? And has Mahmoud Abbas given up completely on any type of negotiations with Israel?
Well, with the current government, yes, the whole Palestinian population has given up, not only President Abbas. And as a matter of escalation, we are keen, especially Fatah movement, to have any kind of escalation to take the form of non-violent resistance. So we would not give the Israeli right political points to score against us and not give them the political cover to continue the atrocities they commit against our civil population. So in other words, if the stalemate continues, yes, there will be forms of non-violent resistance escalating, mobilization of the population through that. And the calls for stopping security coordination has been increasing significantly since we have totally given up on Netanyahu, who's been slamming the door in the face of the peace process ever since he took over and hijacked the state of Israel.
But Dimitri, quick question to you. If security cooperation with Israel ceases, doesn't that also put the Fatah faction and the PLO faction in danger from the Hamas supporters in the West Bank? Because at the end of the day, it's also the security cooperation with Israel that helps maintain the PLO in power.
Absolutely not. This is such a Netanyahu thing. It's unbelievable. Actually, if you look at it, the matter of fact is the number of political prisoners in Israeli jails who belong to Fatah constitute more than 70% of the total political prisoner population. The state of Israel fights Fatah, fights PLO factions, while it's not doing the same against Hamas, which is the opposite what it claims to its own population. And the reason for that, because Fatah and the PLO factions are pragmatic, logical, and realistic in their expectations, and therefore such a combination constitutes a threat to a radical right-wing fanatic government like the state of Israel. People like Netanyahu and the right camp always would like to have radicals on the other side rather than moderate people, because they would be able to sell their own agendas, their own rhetoric to their own people if the moderates were weak on the other side. But fortunately for us and unfortunately for Netanyahu, we are the stronger party here. We hold the ground here. We can protect ourselves, and Hamas does not constitute any kind of threat to us. The only threat to us and to the Israelis is Netanyahu and his right-wing government.
Dimitri, I mean, we can discuss this forever, but always, good to have you on and hear your voice. Thank you for joining us from Ramallah. Not to be resolved, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, definitely not in the first half hour of the show. When we get back, the HSBC could face United States legal actions over Swiss accounts. We will take a closer look at this developing story. First, though, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Good morning. Welcome back to the morning edition at I-24, the place you should be on this February
11th.
I
yes,
know.
this very dusty,
very
bleak
dusty,
morning.
and I walked in this morning, I looked behind me, and the first thing that came to mind was, it's the end of the world as we know it.
Like, I feel like I have half the Sahara and what's left of my teeth.
Tony Graham with the news you missed while scanning the headlines.
Dusty. Okay, let's start with Wall Street Journal headline, which is very sad, and this news broke late yesterday. The United States confirming the death of American ISIS hostage Kayla Mueller.
Yeah.
So, and there is a picture of her, 26 years old, of course, from, I believe, Prescott, Arizona. And this is something that was, kind of held under wraps for at least a little while, because after the Jordanian counter strikes on ISIS, we weren't sure if she actually had perished because of that. And I think the circumstances are still kind of murky.
They're murky. What ISIS came out with after the Jordanian airstrikes and said that she died during the Jordanian airstrikes. I think the heartbreaking thing about this is I saw that also last night, and somebody, her family, posted the last letter they got from her. She was in captivity for quite a while.
Yes.
I think she was held in 2013, a very sad letter that was somehow arrived at her families, that was released by ISIS. But, she supposedly, I think, is the last American hostage. In any event, a terrible, terrible
end. And not the last hostage, but the last
American. The American one.
And, of course, I think more details will be coming out about what communication was exchanged between the White House and other actors
in this
drama.
Definitely.
But sad stuff in the meantime, and dramatic stuff happening, of course, in Yemen, where U.S. News World Report has also reported that the United States will be closing its embassy in Yemen imminently. And this is despite the fact that counterterrorism operations are going to continue. But this is because, of course, since the takeover of the country by the Shiite rebels, the Houthi group, so to speak, it has been destabilizing rapidly.
Right.
And in the short term, as the U.S. News points out, this cannot be seen as anything other than a blow to the Obama administration, because some people might be saying they want to avoid at all costs another Benghazi if they can't secure the embassy.
No,
and
definitely.
get people out. But again, what really is going on there? Again, it's actually kind of hard to say, but it's...
it's first of all, it's great that you're bringing us these headlines about Yemen, a country that seems to have completely, broken apart over the course of the last several weeks, and as you always mention, a hotbed for extreme groups. This is a place where a lot of terrorism sprung out.
Some of the worst al-Qaeda elements, and apparently, according to reports, the United States will still be engaged in those counterterrorism efforts, just not from within the embassy walls. So
in
again,
hiding places. Okay.
There's drones circulating in various places too. So let's see what happens in the next day or two with that. In the meantime, Sharq al-Awsat reports that ISIS has reportedly pulled some of its forces from Aleppo in Syria, withdrawing some of its insurgents from areas northeast of the big city because of strains following recent losses battling Kurds in nearby areas. But it's not clear from the article exactly where the forces that have withdrawn have gone to.
And completely. What's so fascinating about this headline is that yesterday ISIS released a video online by John Cantley from Aleppo, claiming that this is the last of the series, which was a very ominous line to say when held hostage by ISIS and we're being forced to make these these videos. But that said, so this headline, I don't know if it connects, and obviously both you and I are theorizing, but yeah, time
there's definitely some kind of connection there. And again, this, of course, is Obama seeking the war power bill from Congress to fight ISIS with stronger teeth. And maybe, again...
And what does that mean?
What does it mean? Yeah, very fluid situation right now. On a gentler note, the Telegraph reports that Vladimir Putin has gifted Egyptian President al-Sisi with a brand new Kalashnikov.
Yes, please. Moment of silence.
Okay, now.
Sorry. Yeah.
The Kalashnikov, which of course is a signature Russian weapon.
Yes.
And apparently.
And Kalashnikov himself, I think, died last year at the age of 107 or something like that.
Yes, lived to a ripe old age. Now, Russian manufacturers are embarking on a high-profile rebranding of the rifle as a weapon of peace, despite the fact that it's said to kill around 250,000 people every year.
So,
it's Putin.
I think it was when the research shows that Kalashnikov is like the most used in civil.
I mean, well, listen, if you're dealing with Putin, you're not going to get a gift of deer foam
No,
slippers.
I don't think a pigeon was coming around.
No. Dominique Strauss-Kahn is back in the news. The sort of scandal-making former head of the International Monetary Fund, Frenchman. Trial began in Lille over the alleged aiding and assisting with the prostitution of women, and he is defiant, and he has claimed that he was unaware that women who were participating in orgies in hotels in Paris and Washington were actually sex workers. Didn't know. And he said, look, it was only women, nice women. He said it was only 4 times a year, and it was no more than that. So, I don't know how much that case is going to hold up with defiant testimony.
Come on, it was only 4 times a year.
It's only 4 times a year, and he didn't know they were sex workers.
If it was 5, no. Yes. Yeah. Wow.
Keeping things interesting in France. A Wall Street Journal also reports on an interesting potential U-turn in Greece's new left-wing government. The Syriza party has basically come out and said that they actually are going to go ahead with the privatization of the Piraeus port, which is basically one of the hugest economic important things in Greece, because without the Piraeus, you could arguably say there's no Athenian or Greek economy.
True.
So they are maybe sending signals to the Eurozone people that maybe they're there's a lot of intrigue here.
But Greece has become very interesting, I have to say, and as we're all waiting to see if it will be the first one to actually, what's it called?
To break for the Brexit.
For the Brexit.
So mixed messages
I can say Brexit
there.
All day.
North Korea. I know that famous picture of North Korea with the lights out. North Korea.
Yes.
Well, about like a year after it's been published around the internet, the North Korean newspaper is saying that the essence of society is not on flashy lights, and so people are happy being in the dark. essentially.
And having no civil rights whatsoever.
Yeah, you know, no food, no civil rights, no lights.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. And being isolated from the rest of the world.
Give the flashy lights to Vegas. You know? Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, God bless you.
Zimbabwe.
Yeah. What? Zimbabwe?
Yeah, the Robert Mugabe fall-down meme has not sat well with him. The president there has basically fired 27 of his security guards who allowed photographers to capture that moment on film a couple weeks ago.
As opposed to shooting the photographers?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of a cool image, personally. I mean, it's not so bad. It shows that he's nimble. He can still move at 91.
Haven't we all gone through that?
Absolutely.
Right?
On red carpets, right and left.
I mean, yeah. I know. All the time we have to this bit. Tony locked in studio with us as we move along.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next topic that's causing a stir in the financial world. HSBC Holding faces an investigation by the United States authorities and an inquiry by British lawmakers after admitting failings that may have allowed some customers to dodge taxes to the tune of $120 billion. Yes, you heard correct, $120 billion. The documents were downloaded by a former computer security expert at the bank and were released over the weekend by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. The documents contain records of some 30,000 accounts kept at HSBC's Swiss subsidiary, tied to politicians, royalty, designers, and sports figures in every part of the world, including the Middle East. They were also tied to corrupt businessmen, dictators, arms industry officials, and high-end criminals. Around 6,000 accounts were linked to Israel, with some of them belonging to residents. Now, to further discuss this, let's first watch the next report about what's going on with the HSBC and then break it down.
The huge catch of files has sparked criminal probes in several countries and attempts to claw back cash after being stolen by an IT worker in 2007 and passed to French authorities. The files were then obtained by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, or ICIJ, a network of investigative reporters, via French newspaper Le Monde.
In most of these cases, as far as France is concerned, prosecutions are already happening. Trials are either underway or will be brought against people who cheated the tax authorities. And as you know, we already have a case against HSBC for its involvement in or as an accomplice to this tax fraud.
The documents showed that HSBC provided accounts to international criminals, businessmen, politicians, and celebrities, according to the ICIJ. The files were shared with the BBC and The Guardian newspaper in Britain, the U.S. program 60 Minutes, and more than 55 other media organizations worldwide.
I think one of the most important things that we can do is ensure that the era of bank secrecy is behind us, that it is no longer possible for people to hide money offshore. And indeed, we have made very substantial progress on that in recent years. And within 2 to 3 years, all the major financial centres in the world, including Switzerland, will be operating a system that's described as automatic exchange of information, but it means essentially that tax authorities will be sharing information as a matter of course.
A United States Senate panel alleged HSBC acted as a financier to clients routing funds from the world's most dangerous corners, including Mexico, Iran, and Syria, doing regular business in areas tied to drug cartels, terrorist funding, and tax cheats.
Also joining us from London in the UK is the head of the UK Policy and Government Relations at Oxfam, Kathleen Spencer-Chapman. Thank you for joining us. Kathleen, how bad is this?
Well, I think this is really just another example of how in the global tax system there's one set of rules for richest people who can get away with hiding their wealth in these kind of secret bank accounts at a time when around the world many governments are actually having to cut their budgets to vital services, to things like health and education. And also it really shows how entrenched a problem this is. The fact that it was a big household name like HSBC involved in enabling these sorts of sort of secret accounts shows that there's not just a case of a few bad apples or an exception, but this is really how the global tax system is working, and the vast majority of people are losing out. The collaboration sort seems to get us to 2016, where, what is it? It's half of the world's wealth will be in the hands of the 1%. Daniel Roth, also of The Economy magazine, with us in studio. When something like that comes out, first of all, if the U.S. is checking into it, will they really do anything? I'm sorry for being incredibly pessimistic.
It's a really great question. The answer is probably something small. That's what's happened thus far when HSBC was found to be laundering money for Mexican drug cartels.
Words, are you?
No,
they were found out for laundering money.
Yeah, so this is a big deal. No criminal charges were filed, something that Elizabeth Warren, the senator who's outspoken in trying to push some sort of banking reform and some sort of repercussions for the crisis. She mentioned this famously, that there was no criminal charges, first of all, for laundering money for Mexican drug cartels. Second of all, you're talking about a bank that's worth trillions of dollars in assets that was charged something just under $2 billion, which is a lot for any individual. But as was just mentioned, there's a huge difference between the way individual people are treated and the way these major trillion-dollar institutions are treated.
And when something like this comes out, and Kathleen, I'm wondering out loud with you, it's almost the same question. Will HSBC be fined? Will this have any effect? I'm sure that you people at Oxfam are going to try to have this effect and any type of dealings as such in the future. What are the reactions to that, and what can be done to HSBC as opposed to just a fine, or as Daniel mentioned, a wagging of a finger?
Well, I mean, clearly, if we're going to sort out these sorts of problems in the global tax system, we need to make sure that where these kinds of things are uncovered, that people are held to account, and that also that the authorities are able to recover the tax revenue that's lost from this. But ultimately, we also need much broader action in the tax system. We need real global cooperation so that the wealthiest people and companies aren't able to trick the system in this kind of a way, and that's only going to happen if countries really get together and tackle the issues, tackle the kind of secrecy that allows these things to happen. As Oxfam, we care about these issues because while this sort of inequality is allowed to happen, that we're never going to end the levels of poverty that exist, where you've got more than 1 billion people still living on $1.25 a day in the world. At the same time as the wealthiest people are able to hide the money in this way. So it really needs to be sorted out.
Yeah, no, definitely. And Daniel, if I'm looking at the list, I mean, you're looking also, from the Middle East, and several people from this country, the likes of Benny Steinmetz. Who's
about $10 billion from this country was in this mix.
It was in this mix. Yeah. But if it's HSBC, and I'm asking you to theorize, this, and HSBC is a huge name, as you mentioned, this must be something that, and is there any type of information that this is part and parcel of most of the big banks around the world?
We can assume that if HSBC, which is maybe the second biggest bank in the world, we can assume that this is common practice. You hear a lot of talk about from banking heads about reforms that have happened since 2008. Well, and a lot of this information is coming out from before 2008. Right. But it's not exactly true. You're seeing these kinds of stories come out. You're seeing the same kinds. You see every day new articles about the kinds of we can't say illegal, but certainly questionable banking practices, that the same type that led to the crisis
in 2008. Exactly. Yeah. Which at the end of the day, some people were fine, but everybody moved along. Kathleen Spencer-Chapman from London, thank you for being with us. Daniel Roth, always such a pleasure to have you in studio. When we get back, a closer look at the First Lady of Israel, Sara Netanyahu. Why does the media in Israel love to hate her? We'll try and figure that one out. First, though, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Welcome back. It is still Wednesday, February 2015. This is still the morning edition. Last I checked, I'm still Yael Avi, and thank you for staying with us, and you should have, because this one is one that is hard to break. With 33 days left of the Israeli elections, we would like to take a closer look at Israel's First Lady, Mrs. Sara Netanyahu. Now, ever since she first appeared on the public radar nearly 20 years ago, Sara Netanyahu has been a popular target for the Israeli press. The latest scandal to plague Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's third wife involves allegations that she pocketed thousands of shekels from deposits on empty bottles that were returned on her orders to Jerusalem supermarkets over several years, even though the bottle deposits were state property. Confused? Don't worry, it's getting more confusing. Married to Netanyahu since 1991, the 56-year-old child psychologist is no stranger to scandal. Last March, for example, she was sued for abusive behavior by the former manager of Netanyahu's official residence, who had previously served as her personal bodyguard. Now, all extensively reported in the Israeli press. So does the media in Israel especially have it in for Sara Netanyahu? Or have they always picked on Israeli first ladies? To break this down, we are joined in studio by the literary supplement editor of Haaretz, Benny Ziffer. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You had the pleasure of actually investigating this in depth. And before we break it down, let's take a look at Mandy Kagosowski's report about Sara Netanyahu and who she is or might be.
Meet Israel's First Lady, Sara Netanyahu, the wife of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and according to many, the behind-the-scenes force that drives much of the current governance. Ever since she emerged in the public scene together with her husband in the 1990s, Sara has been at the center of great media attention, which has only increased over the years, hitting an all-time high during this current elections campaign. And this attention is not for the work she does as an accomplished psychologist. So who is this person, who in 2013 was ranked by Forbes Israel as the country's most powerful woman? The future Mrs. Netanyahu was born in 1958 to the Ben Arsi family. She was working as a flight attendant when she met Mr. Netanyahu, then a budding politician. Both divorced, they married in 1991 and parented 2 boys, Yair and Avner. Over the years, Sara has gained media notoriety as allegedly being difficult and demanding, even entitled. Scandal after scandal hounded her. In the latest one, known as Bottlegate, she is accused of pocketing thousands of dollars from recycled bottles purchased with state funds. And there are other stories, most of which relate to claims of exorbitant spending by the first couple. Thousands of dollars spent on ice cream, flowers, scented candles, wine, and more, all from the taxpayer's pocket. But perhaps the most appalling stories are those of improper conduct that keep emerging from the staff of the Prime Minister's residence, recounting tales of alleged humiliation, degradation, screaming fits, and even violence by the First Lady. A lawsuit filed by a former housekeeper settled outside of court in 2012. Last month, affidavits of 2 former employees were submitted to court as part of the ongoing case of the residence's ex-custodian. With the Israeli elections 33 days away, one thing is clear. Mrs. Netanyahu will never simply be the woman behind the man.
Benny Ziffer, you are one of the few chosen lucky journalists to actually sit down with Mrs. Netanyahu.
Yeah,
and you wrote an article that many people I know actually said to me, you have to check out Benny Ziffer and Haaretz. He seems to have fallen in love with Mrs. Netanyahu.
Yeah, I met the person.
Okay.
Behind the myth, this demonized myth of Mrs. Netanyahu. Okay, so I said to myself, the bad things about Sara Netanyahu have been said. I have nothing to add to it. Okay, let's check and see what is there anything else to say about it. Okay, so I went to see her. And it was quite simple to go to see her, even though people have made so many, stories about approaching this person. And I'm nothing. I'm only a journalist. I have nothing to do with politics. I just went there and I saw her, and we had a really nice conversation that had to. It was due to be like half an hour, and it was more than 3 hours that we sat together.
Did she serve you
I was fascinated. No. It was tea. I can tell you, it was tea. It was tea, not biscuits. I didn't want biscuits. Fruit.
Okay.
Okay. No. Now.
3 hours, but
okay. The woman was, I think, fascinating. First of all, because I felt that she's totally sincere with me. Totally sincere. It wasn't something that is natural because she didn't know me beforehand. She didn't know what I would write. She took a big risk, okay? And still, she was sincere. She told me her truth about all these scandals. Okay, she told me her story. It wasn't an interview, so I cannot now
You can't really relay the information.
Yeah, the information.
It was all off the record.
But what
we won't tell anyone.
No, okay. but what I can say is that I got the general impression was of a woman who is really, I think, very much alone, who is very nostalgic. For example, she had a very good relationship, a very warm relationship with her father, and now she's missing him a lot after he passed away. I think she's a good mother, and the examples she gave me about this pursuit after her.
That's what I want to ask about.
Her story was really convincing.
What was her story?
Now, okay, she showed me around in the house. Okay, she showed me, for example,
house was this
the house in Balfour Street, the residence of
the Prime Minister. Lucky you.
Yeah. Okay. Supposedly luxurious with all these candles and flower arrangements and all that. Okay, I went to the toilets. Sorry. Okay.
No, good. Yes.
And I said to myself, is that the place where President Obama is also going when he's visiting here? It was a shame, I must tell you. It's so old-fashioned. So I can't tell you how really degraded is the
But did you not think that maybe President Obama has a special bathroom in that house?
No, this is the place where the guests are coming.
Okay. That's the guest bathroom.
The guest place. Okay, when they are invited. Okay.
No candles, no.
Okay, so instead of candles and flower arrangements, they have all kinds of I don't know, other decorations with pomegranates and horrible things, bad taste. Okay, because she told me we cannot now I cannot spend any more money on all these things, so it must be all kinds of bad taste things. Okay, and I must tell you that I've been to the French
residence,
Hotel Matignon. Okay. And when you compare one to the other, it's a shame even to compare these things. It's really a 50. The style of the 50s. Perhaps it got renewed in the 80s, and then it stopped to be.
And that was it.
It stopped there. Really an old-fashioned
But do we
house.
really believe, Benny, at the end of the day, it's also Haaretz newspaper, for example, a journalist that we love and admire, Emil Oren, it sits here many times, who, he came out with the information about Bottlegate.
Yeah.
I mean, over the course of the last, I would say, almost 20 years, yes, Sara Netanyahu has been hounded by the press. Personally, as a woman, I have to say, I don't think she should be, the focus of any type of anti-Netanyahu campaign. But that said, if so much of this is reported, can't there be a sliver of truth behind it?
Okay, I'll tell you that I think that Sara Netanyahu is a woman, a lady. She's not very let's say that the average Israeli woman is not very far from what Sara Netanyahu is. Aggressiveness, every Israeli is aggressive.
Whatever are you talking about?
No, present company excluded.
Excluded, yes, of course.
Okay. Aggressiveness, ask people working in all kinds of companies and who want to have a reduction of 2 shekels for etc.
That's a good point. No, that's a good point.
So all these, the aggressiveness is part of our culture. So when you take one person and take him out of context and show him as you demonize him, it's not fair. And I think it's really something unfair was done to Sara Netanyahu. And my explanation is that people couldn't cope with the fact that we had a prime minister with a young woman, a young
wife,
who had needs of a young wife, for example, going to dye her hair and make nails and all these things. And there wasn't any, where to put this thing. While in France, for example, the wife of the president or the girlfriend,
the first
girlfriend, has 500,000 euros only for her personal expenses.
Because she's French.
Okay. So Sara Netanyahu, because they live abroad and they see a lot of people abroad and they see the norms of behavior abroad, they want also to have this luxury.
But the alleged abuse of
The
staff.
alleged abuse, I don't want to lose time for you, Tony, but I have to say, but at the end of the day, this is Israel. And Benny, you know, when the middle class has eroded so much in the country of Israel, when people cannot finish the month, so to speak, sometimes I think maybe one should, you know, watch how they live their life if they are leaders of a country. But that said, I want to say this has been fascinating. I want to have you on every week with, you know, follow-ups on Sara Netanyahu. You are locked in studio with us, though, as we move on to the web review that is the spiral viral of Tony Grant. Yes.
Good morning again, first of all. I want to start with a little bit of TV news, since we are in TV news.
True.
American TV news. We have learned that Jon Stewart is going to be leaving The Daily Show. And this has been announced. He's going to be staying on for a little while. But
I just want to let you know that I heard it this morning, and I'm going into mourning.
Well, you know, there's always John Oliver. And I'm thinking that, you know, last week, tonight, I think that maybe that had something to do with it, frankly, because that's where the buzz is, frankly.
The NBC
it's on HBO, isn't it?
Sorry, it's on HBO. Right.
Yeah, who was actually his protege, so to speak. Interesting.
Good point.
Yeah,
good point.
The British are taking over.
And?
Basically. Holocaust?
Of course.
And Urban Outfitters do not mix. Okay, so
isn't
Urban
it the
Outfitters.
second time around?
It's not the first time. They had this little tapestry with a little pink star and little gray and white stripes. I'm thinking this company must be headquartered somewhere in Florida, where the IQs are just starting at a very low level.
Were they the ones that came out with the little outfit that looked like a star?
With the yellow star. Was that Urban Outfitters or was that Zara?
It was Zara, actually. It was Zara. What is wrong with these people?
I mean,
for the Holocaust look.
And what do you do with the tapestry? It's like, do you like walk around with it covered in?
I have no idea. Is that coming back? Was it ever in fashion?
I don't know. Maybe in the 13th century.
Benny, we do real news here as well. Yes.
Have you seen Uma Thurman's new look?
Yes.
It's her face.
So she ironed it.
I gotta tell you, I am not fazed by plastic surgery, having grown up in Southern California, but I am shocked because Uma Thurman is gorgeous no matter what she does, but what did she do?
Yeah, what did she do?
It's a red carpet moment there a few days ago when she debuted
What's the before, what's the after?
Well, the before is, you know, sort of elfin, sort of, you know, a nymph in the forest.
Right?
Look, the bangs, but her eyes seem to have, like, drawn closer together.
Drawn closer together, and one is smaller. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No bangs.
No bangs.
But
very smooth for 50.
Yeah. What does Benny think?
I think it's difficult to distinguish what
it is. Right? In one she's 20 and in one she's 73.
No, but anyway, so interesting stuff. But
see, women are mean. I'm just saying.
No. I mean, I think that they're all wonderful, but sometimes they change their looks unpredictably. Now, speaking of actually meanness, the Grammys. Still tongues are wagging because of Taylor Swift, who is a very polarizing figure in the pop-averse.
Thank you for putting it that way.
Pop-averse. Sam Smith is apparently caught in a hate sandwich between Katy Perry and...
between a purple-haired Katy Perry.
Taylor Swift, for reasons I shall not go into.
Do not.
But we don't know because apparently Katy Perry and Taylor Swift have some issues, as the British say. So...
Is it issues or
issues? Yeah. Now, one of those issues...
Benny, you're never leaving. Yes.
We cannot talk about the Grammys without mentioning Jay-Z.
No.
Now, Taylor Swift, who I do adore, allegedly invited Jay-Z to brunch. Now, when you're invited to brunch from Taylor Swift, you basically have to go.
You do not say no.
You do not say no.
Yes.
But apparently, he was a cool reception to this invitation. And it's kind of like a Nancy Reagan-esque kind of thing, like, let's do brunch. And Taylor Swift is, you know, like the reigning pop star. So it's sort of like, is it sort of a patch-up thing that they want to work on?
I'm on Jay-Z's side.
A lot of intrigue.
Yeah, a lot of it. I'm on Jay-Z's side.
No, I'm on Taylor's side.
Glamorous world. I'm the editor of a literary supplement.
There is nothing more glamorous than words. Oh my God. You know.
This is the part. We dealt with Dostoevsky in the first hour of the show. I promise you.
Dostoevsky himself.
Exactly. Who cares?
The reigning queen of glamour.
The reigning queen. And sadly,
Jane Fonda.
Jane Fonda. Real quick, we've got 2 seconds.
Did you see her look at the Grammys?
No, please show us the look.
Okay, she looked like Gumby.
No.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh,
Gumby,
yes.
yeah, there you go.
Gumby. Okay, on that horrific, really hard images to look at, but we will leave you on that. And when we get back, yeah, Valentine's Day is coming up in several days. We'll take a look at who in God's name invented that horrific day. Stay with us. Before, let's go to some more of the morning headlines. I-24 News Morning Edition. Thank you for staying with us. It is part of the, well, almost the end of the show on this February 11th. Yeah, I had to do this so people will see what gorgeous men I'm sitting with.
Thank you.
It's not working. It's not working. We are joined in studio by the Sport Magazine correspondent Michael Friedman. To my left, and of course to my right, is Ron Friedman.
No relation.
None whatsoever. I'm Yael Levi, and I will be your waitress for today. Doesn't look like I'm about to serve you a martini. But that said, Michael Friedman of the Sports Magazine, what do you have for us today?
So we had a really big match this past weekend. Real Madrid lost to Atletico, but it was more than just a loss. I mean,
lost or was smoked and
smoked is the word. 4-0, thrashing, absolutely.
Humbled.
Humbled. It's just, it was
blood from every. Yeah, okay. How bad?
It was bad. So it's kind of like a little change in Spain, and we're seeing now something exciting with this Diego Simeone's team really rising ahead.
We have a report about this, don't we?
We do.
Let's take a look at this horrific death.
Spanish supermen Real Madrid may have just found their kryptonite. For years, the Santiago Bernabeu held banners which read, "Wanted, worthy rival for a decent derby." Well, they asked for it, and now they got it. After 14 years of dismantling their neighbors in embarrassing one-sided matches, the roles have now reversed. As the old saying goes, be careful what you wish for, because you might just get it. While Real dominates the world, they can't replicate that performance when they play their crosstown rival. In the last 6 matches between the two sides, Atletico have won 4 times and the other 2 have ended in a draw. So what has changed from the past? One key idol, the passionate and respected Diego Simeone, who's managed to get his players to perform at the highest level.
We are looking for the right football characteristics, good combinations and a high velocity and drive. It wasn't easy without Raúl Garcia to have these players for an important match. A very difficult field, but the characteristic for the match was to play with high tempo and good combinations and drive, and to replicate this, and well, that was good enough.
With this win, Atletico have now cut the gap to league leaders to 4 points and made this title race even more thrilling. This win also helped Barcelona, who just sit 1 point behind Real. A painful loss for Carlo Ancelotti's side, which is not the type of football he wishes to see. And he knows his team did not show up to play.
Today we were second in everything. We lost all our tackles and the ball in all the areas. We didn't have a good game. We didn't have one player that had a good game.
Of Real's last 37 matches, they scored in 34 of them, and the only time they couldn't find the net was against Atletico. Simeone's team were the underdogs last year, and despite everything, managed to win La Liga. Real Madrid will have to wait to take their revenge, and they will not underestimate their rivals anymore.
How incredible is this?
It's exciting. It really is. I mean, if you look at...
No, but explain. This destabilizes the whole table,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
So La Liga right now, it's kind of all open. Everyone expects Real Madrid to win the league, and right now, Barcelona's only 1 point behind, so they're very happy that Atletico stepped up. And for Atletico, they're only 4 points, so the title race is open. There's a lot more football to be played. And
Madrid, this is the first time in what? In how many years that they are not dominating?
I mean, they're still dominating, but they're not dominating Atletico, which,
right.
I mean, at the Calderon where Atletico plays, they hadn't had a win against their crosstown neighbors in 17 years before, Diego Simeone came in and really gave the players the ideal and the mentality that they can win and they can go up. And he's really structured his side into a winning team. So
Diego now can get anything he wants.
They're linking him to Manchester City,
wow.
But he's actually from there. This is where he belongs, and he loves Atletico Madrid. So they're saying he might go in the summer, but I think hopefully he'll stay because it's a beautiful story what he's done and what he's trying to do. And like we spoke about
What is the story? I have no idea what you're talking about.
You don't know the story? It's a man who's making a team into a greatness. And now we saw, China's been investing in Atletico Madrid.
Right.
So with new money as well, it could also provide a great opportunity for growth in the future.
I do know the story. No. Definitely, you brought it over. Okay, so that's looking good. Anything else on the sports level?
We also have a very interesting story. A French couple, decided to go across Antarctica on their feet. Very, very intriguing, very challenging. I don't think you and I are capable of this. I certainly.
Easy.
You can.
Yeah, Canadian.
I know. I love Ron sitting here like with a scruffy face. Sure, I can do that.
I have no chance, but we have a nice video of this.
You never know. Okay, so they go, and we have a report. Let's take a look.
This was an expedition of a lifetime. Traveling more than 2,000 kilometers in 73 days with temperatures sometimes verging on negative 50 degrees, a French couple decided to undertake the longest ski unassisted crossing of Antarctica. Stephanie and Jeremiah Jiquel collected more than 8,000 euros for the Associated Petits Princesses, an organization whose purpose is to make dreams of children and adolescents with serious diseases come true. The two also answered questions from students during their journey, as it is such a rarity for one to experience the great Antarctica.
We never sought isolation. We were confronted with an infinite silence, with infinite space, which was magical, magnificent. We saw landscapes which were immense, but we were not looking for this isolation. We really wanted to share an adventure to make a little bit more accessible this continent that is so inaccessible.
Jeremiah's wife was especially amazed by the nature and feeling in the outdoors. This quiet continent left her truly in a state of peace and thinking about the wonders of the world.
In Antarctica, I became aware of the vastness of our land, to the point that I felt no longer on Earth at times. Because it is huge, there's no noise. The wind does not sound contrary to popular belief. The wind makes noise, but we make no noise. If not for the cold and extremely far distance, we can see for hundreds of miles.
But a challenge like this is truly demanding, and it is not easy to complete. With frostbite, a virus, a broken tent, and other challenges along the way, the two had to really push hard throughout and keep their morale high.
It was quite hard early in the expedition. I was wondering if I could make the number of miles required per day and complete the crossing on time. It was mostly my doubt that I couldn't do the number of kilometers each day. Then after a week it was better, and then we had more doubt to whether we would finish.
Jeremiah and Stephanie Jiquel have achieved something truly special. This unique journey was an unimaginable adventure, something they'll remember forever.
So many things to say. Listen, it's a beautiful story.
Can you do it?
The idea of the infinite silence.
I take it back. I totally couldn't do it.
But think about it. They're married. They're married. I'm just wondering, what horrible fight was before.
I'll leave you here. Both came back alive.
Yeah, it was before. I was like, yes, let's do this and not speak now.
Yeah. And what's wild is, like, one day the man is just hiking through Antarctica, and the next he goes to his law firm and goes to work.
Guess you gotta be French. You gotta be French, dude. No, it's a wonderful, cause that they did this for and whatnot. I mean, you gotta be insane. You gotta be insane. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. If you survive that, they definitely are gonna stay married.
Forever.
One would think, right? Yeah. There we have it.
That's
like the ultimate test.
A Sasquatch or a Yeti or something, and love happens in the weirdest of places.
Yeah, then there you have that would be Ron Friedman. No relation to Michael Friedman, exactly. Who we're moving to with anything and everything that happened this week in history to show us that back in time was also as insane as today. Yes.
Yeah. So we were talking romance and Valentine's Day this week. We'll get to that a bit later.
Please.
But we'll start chronologically going back. What we do in this section, take you back memory lane, see what important events in history happened in this week.
What?
So we go back all the way back to February 11th, 2013. We start with
February 11, 2013. Yes.
Pope Benedict.
Yes.
Becomes the first pope to resign willfully since 1415. major occasion, historic
Huge.
event.
No, I mean, to this day, I'm so glad you brought this day because I was walking around, was it 2 years ago? It's 2 years ago 13. At this point.
Yeah.
It's 2 years ago when, the German, I call him the German Pope, when he resigned, and I don't think that we will ever find out what really happened there. Did you buy at the time that it was because of ill health?
No, well, he said it was old age. He said he wasn't capable of living up to the demands of the job, which, fair to say, they are demanding and lots of public appearances. But it's a mysterious explanation.
Very mysterious. It begs for someone, for a Dan Brown
and the fact that the last pope that did that beforehand was in 1415, and that was a different situation altogether.
Who was that, Gregory?
It was Gregory. Good for you. Gregory the 12th.
I know my Christianity, folks. Okay.
And that was to end a civil war, completely unrelated. Although, and we know after Pope Benedict, we got Pope Francis, which...
No, but I'm just looking at, because if you look at Benedict, who was very dogmatic and very... I do know my Christianity. Sorry, I'm patting myself on the shoulder. But yeah, but very dogmatic and very, like Opus Dei-ish, and Opus Dei are very hardcore. Francis is like hippie chick.
Totally.
Totally.
He's taken it in a different direction. Very interesting. Yeah. Moving on, I'm sure you remember this story as well. February 12th, 1999. President Bill Clinton was acquitted after 5 weeks of an impeachment trial. Yes.
No, but let's all do this together.
I don't know. I'm not sure about hand motions.
No, the hand motion. We don't do that. Okay, fine.
We have a brief clip of him.
Yeah, let's take a look. Clinton, 99.
This afternoon in this room, from this chair, I testified before the Office of Independent Counsel and the grand jury. I answered their questions truthfully, including questions about my private life, questions no American citizen would ever want to answer. Indeed, I did have a relationship with Ms. Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong. It constituted a critical lapse in judgment and a personal failure on my part for which I am solely and completely responsible. I misled people, including even my wife. I deeply regret that. Our country has been distracted by this matter for too long, and I take my responsibility for my part in all of this. That is all I can do. Now it is time, in fact, it is past time to move on. We have important...
I gotta say, first of all, something like that would never happen in France.
True, he wouldn't have to be. Yeah.
Secondly, because some of us are American, Canadian, it's cute, it's almost. But Brian Williams, takes leave for 6 months, okay, the anchor of NBC News. And the President of the United States, for, supposedly, allegedly lying, misforgetting an RPG, and the President of the United States got to stay on.
But how would you like to be in his shoes giving that?
That's awful. That is very true.
I mean, forget the Senate hearings, and it's just...
Because in any other, country that respects itself, as known as France, he'd probably sitting there going, yes, of course, I had a relation.
I had 3 of them under the...
Exactly, and people were going...
Bravo.
I know.
All right, next up, back to 1996, February 10th, man versus machine. Kasparov loses his chess match against the computer Deep Blue.
Wow, yes.
We have a little clip of that as well.
I want to see that clip.
From the 17-year-old who's just smashing professional grandmasters.
Kasparov was not a person to be controlled.
He is the strongest player ever in the history of the game.
In the other corner, the world's greatest chess-playing computer, a machine called Deep Blue.
Okay.
I remember that. I don't remember that. I remember stories being told about that.
No, it's an interesting thing. I mean, he played computer.
Really interesting. It's a groundbreaking moment when it comes to well, first of all, of course, the machine won. I think it was amazing.
But ultimately, man was victorious. It was a best of 6 series of games, and Kasparov did come up with an upper hand. So we can pat ourselves on the back.
We can, but I think it took him enough time to sort of learn the computer's mechanism or something to that effect.
I wonder whether modern computers it would be like no competition because they're learning programs and stuff like that.
There's no chance we can beat the machine.
No, because the programs today would be able to figure out
artificial intelligence.
Yeah, before they eat us all. I'm just saying.
That's next. We have
Valentine's Day, honey.
We have to get to Valentine's. All right, so Valentine's Day. We know it with all the chocolates and flowers and all these beautiful things we're looking at the screen, teddy bears. But the actual history of Saint Valentine
what is the history of this horrific day?
Horrific. Like most Catholic saints, he was actually beheaded. We're talking about the year 278 AD. During the reign of the Emperor Claudius II.
Saint Valentine? Okay.
Yes, so we're talking about Saint Valentine. During the time, Rome was involved in many unpopular and bloody battles, and they wanted to build up the ranks. And one of the things that were stopping them from recruiting new soldiers is too close connections between husbands and wives and husbands and families. Men didn't want to go out to war, didn't want to leave their loved ones. Right. So
wouldn't happen in my household. And
Claudius banned. No more engagements, no more marriages, until the war effort is won.
Over. And why is he beheaded for?
No, so that was the emperor. The emperor banned
everything. And
Valentine, he was on the down low. He was marrying couples and helping love ensue. And for that terrible sin, he was clubbed to death and beheaded.
As he should have.
Yes.
No, seriously. Don't you? A really quick, survey here. You like Valentine's Day?
It's okay.
Not really.
It's come on. It's a bull bleep day, and we're Jewish.
It's a Hallmark day.
It's a bull bleep day.
For money.
For money. Bingo. There we have it.
And the idea of Valentine, if we have a moment, is the story goes that he fell in love with his jailer's daughter and left her a note signed, "You are my Valentine."
Your Valentine. Yeah, I'm still nauseous. Thank you for being with us. Of course, do not forget to watch I-24 News Morning Show tomorrow morning. Check us out on all these social networks, Facebook, Twitter, whatnot. And, tune in tomorrow morning and have a great day.